There can be many reasons teens or young adults aren't focused on religion even after growing up Christian.
And that's not to disrespect anyone who does buy and who does believe, but it just wasn't convincing to me.
Some feel practicing faith in Christ is a barrier to acceptance within the world around them.
I feel like it's even harder in college trying to fit in and practicing religion as well.
Others might say it's a thing of the past.
The 21st century is a lot more like science and a lot more religion doesn't really have that big of a hold like it used to.
The Drew Mariani Show on Relevant Radio.
This is something I think a lot of parents, a lot of siblings are probably saying, man, I can't, I don't know the reason. I've never seen anything like it. Why are our young leaving the church, and as early as before the age of 23? This alarming number of young people walking away from the most important thing in their life, and that should be the Catholic Church. We live in a time when science and technology, they're at the forefront of everything, from our education to our entertainment. And today, young, they're bombarded with messages that make it seem like faith is, odd. It's antiquated. It's out of date. That's not true. I mean, if you know your history, if you go back, the Catholic Church has this incredible tradition of embracing both faith and reason, right? Some of the greatest scientists in history were devout Catholics. Father Georges Lemaître, he was the Belgian priest who proposed the Big Bang Theory, right? St. Albert the Great made unbelievable contributions to the fields of biology and chemistry and physics. Yet somehow, this narrative, I think it is? It's truly demonic. It's diabolic. Satan loves. He'll use any tactic to draw souls away from God. So we have this narrative that the church is against science, and for some reason has taken a root in the minds of young people and is driving them away. It's again about self, and again that's so. I see the fingerprints of the evil one on this. These values of individualism, of self-expression, of the rejection of traditional authority. Young people live up in a world right now, and they'll say, "You do you," right? Or my truth is my truth. Your truth is your truth. We live in this dictatorship of relativism, this idea that the church teaches objective truth, especially when it comes to issues like morality and sexuality and the dignity of life. Well, that's old-fashioned, right? Or that's intolerant. You can't hold that view. You have to tolerate everybody's sexuality and morality. A lot of people are thinking that they can find meaning elsewhere, outside of the parameters of the church. Honestly, you're going to go off the cliff. Studies have shown that young people are becoming more secular. We live in a secular culture. They're identifying themselves as the NONESs, the nuns, those who claim no religious affiliation. This trend is continuing. My question is, where will it be in 10 or 20 years? What will the church look like if we do not engage the next generation? I'm a man of hope. There's good news. It's not too late. There are lots of ways we can stem the tide, and that's what I want to talk about today. It is an honor to have with me this afternoon former colleague of mine here, one of the great voices on the air, Msgr. Stuart Swetland. He right now is the president of Donnelly College in Kansas City, Kansas, serves as the executive secretary for Fellowship of Catholic Students as well. And you can check him out at donnelly.edu. That's a great institution, so I hope you'll do that. Msgr, welcome back.
It's great to be with you, Drew.
You are on a university campus. Young students come in and say that the church is out of date. You had said that science is one of those points. What are you hearing? What studies have been done? What surveys have been done? Give me your assessment.
Right. Well, the statistics, and you referred to some of them, are startling, and it should wake us up that we have a lot of work to do. Only 30% of Americans raised Catholic are still practicing their faith. 10% of adults in the United States consider themselves ex-Catholics. And among the young, nearly 80% of cradle Catholics are no longer Catholics by the age of 23. So we've got work to do to tell the story of salvation history, of what God did and is doing much, much better. Now, being an ex-Navy guy, I have to say, when you're being swarmed by the enemy, one of the things you can say, it's a target-rich environment, right? Wherever I aim, I've got to hit. For us who are involved in evangelizing, like Relevant Radio is, like your listeners are, this is an opportunity for us to have a first layer of people we need to reach. are fellow Catholics who have walked away or are walking away from the church. And among the young, as we heard in your entry there, your introduction there, one of the reasons, and it's a false reason, it's a lie straight from the depths of hell, is this perception that somehow Catholic faith is incompatible with science. Nothing could be further from the truth. And it's that area in particular I think we should focus on for many of our especially educated young men and women.
Well, Monsignor, I'm grateful that you're pulling back the veil on this. I really am. Let's take a few calls for you, and then we can unpack it even further. Rocco in Brooklyn, New York. Good afternoon.
Yes, hi. Thank you. Thank you for taking my call. I think there's many reasons why the young are leaving the church, but I heard it said on a podcast once, the speaker was talking about which is the sin that draws more people into hell. And I think he was quoting one of the doctors of the church. I'm sorry, I don't remember who it is, a saint of some kind, but they said that lust or unchaste behavior. And I think nowadays, a lot of the young don't want to be told how to live their life and what to do. And the church is standing firm against this. And I think that's one of the reasons that they leave. And a few of the people that are fighting this, Jason Everett, Christopher West, and Father Augustino, they're trying to teach chastity again. And I think that's one of the ways to get the kids back to the church.
Rocco, I love your call. Thank you for bringing that up. By the way, it was Our Lady of Fatima who said that more souls, go to hell for sins of impurity than anything else. And of course, that is an easy remedy, a confession. Father, let's talk about Rocco's point there.
There's no doubt that this is one of the issues, but quite frankly, what the generation is starting to discover, and unfortunately for some of them, they have to learn it through the school of hard knocks, is that unchastity is unfulfilling and ultimately boring. Because what the soul wants is authentic and true love. And that is not going to be found in promiscuity and unchastity. So this is why we have to proclaim the truth on this area as well, that the authentic way of loving, of giving oneself totally as a gift, that way, whether it be through consecrated life and celibacy or through the gift of holy matrimony, that's exciting, that's beautiful, that's fulfilling, it's life-giving. And I think the young are starting to come back to that. I'm finding more and more people very open. We just did a Theology of the Body workshop for free over the summer. And, people who took their time out in the summer, they wanted to hear a different story than the, quite frankly, boring narrative and unexciting narrative that the world is offering.
I would think more so than science. I mean, you had pointed out that, people look at the church like anti-science. I would think it would be sexual morality. I mean, people want for license. They want to be able to do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. And they don't want the church. They look at the church like it's a book of rules that says no to everything that they want to do. That's not really the case. But on a college campus especially, I would think the sexual morality argument would be a big one.
There's no doubt that people struggle in this area. But I still think that many, many people, their first step out of the church is intellectual before it's the giving into sin. I think, if we're going to be renewed, St. Paul says in Romans 12:2, the first step to being renewed is the renewal of the mind. The first step to being transformed in Christ is the renewal of the mind. We have to be thinking right. And part of I did a conference this summer at CUA, Donnelly co-sponsored. We were working on some wonderful work by a Jesuit who's deceased, Richard Pendergast. Herder and Herder is publishing his work posthumously. Volume 2 was just published, called The Cosmic Hierarchy, the Universe and Its Many Irreducible Levels. He was a physicist and a theologian, and he's trying to put it all together in, put what I call the unified field theory is the holy grail for physicists. Mm-hmm. He's trying to put it all together to show how faith and reason can be, how the story can be told that takes into consideration cutting edge physics and takes into consideration the latest in the other fields of science and what we know to be true from faith. It's a wonderful series. We just did a conference on it. But I was inspired to partly be involved with this because I see so many people walking away. And I'll give you just one example of a convert who said that his walk away from Christianity started with struggling with the question of science and faith. And that was J.D. Vance, the vice presidential nominee on the Republican ticket. he was honest in his conversion that he said he wasn't clearly thinking, but he ran into trouble because the evolutionary theory he was learning in science, the biology he was learning, which seemed to make sense and seemed to line up well with the data, was incompatible with the faith he had been given as a youngster in his evangelical Pentecostal upbringing. And so he walked away, but he was honest enough to also say, but there's also that weakness. He said it was easy to walk away because right now, among the cultural elite, it is cool, if you will. He didn't use that term, but it is the accepted way of being is to be an atheist or an agnostic. And he says he did it for, his walking away from faith was partly just laziness, and I was entering the elite, and that's what the elite want, so it was easy to shed my faith. Well, here, I think we need to be countercultural. Unfortunately, J.D. Vance came across some good friends who were Catholic, and he reread Augustine, and he could go back and interpret Scripture and the story of creation in light of knowing that science and faith doesn't contradict, which is exactly what the Catholic Church teaches, starting, from the beginning, but reinforced infallibly at Vatican I. And it led him, because he had good friends and good priests that helped him, it led him eventually to his profession into the Catholic Church.
There are a lot of different efforts to try to win souls back. I think we need a loving church, a place. I knew a girl one time who left the church. She was out partying all night, came in her night away, whatever she wore to the bars the night before, but she was out and she wanted to go to church, and she sat in the back pew, and some lady turned around and yelled at her and says, "What are you doing here dressed like that?" Now, there is a point about coming reverently to church, but that girl left the church for a long time. It was years before she went back. So, we need a loving and welcoming environment. But I think one of the most powerful tools we have for sharing the faith, especially when it comes to evangelizing, bringing loved ones back to the church, is storytelling, right? There's something about personal story that resonates in the ways that mere facts or arguments about, the church, what the catechism teaches, or why sexual ethics are this, or, Think about it. When Jesus wanted to teach the crowds, what did he do? He taught through parables, and he always did it in a straightforward, beautiful way. He didn't lecture. He didn't go into, theology. He told stories about lost sheep and prodigal sons and mustard seeds and good Samaritans. Why? Because it sticks with you. They work in a way that, they move the heart. They enter the imagination. They help you see yourself in a different light. And I think that's such an interesting perspective. Maybe it's something that you and I can apply. Take St. Augustine. His conversion story, it has inspired people for over 1,000 years. St. Monica prayed tirelessly for him. Stories matter. So, Msgr, let's pick up on that point if we could. There's a lot of things we can talk about in terms of winning souls back, but I think you really need to be able to communicate in a way that resonates both in the heart and the mind.
Right, exactly. And let me tell a little story. At the beginning of the scientific revolution, when rationalism was making headways in Europe, the bishops of the world came together at the First Vatican Council, and they took on this question, and unanimously in their constitution on the church, on faith in the church, they said this: though faith is above reason, there can never be any real discrepancy between faith and reason. Since the same God who reveals mysteries and infuses faith has bestowed the light of reason on the human mind, God cannot deny himself, nor can truth ever contradict truth. That beautiful quotation, as someone who's a convert, my first academic degree is in physics, it was the belief that the universe could not be an accident that kept me at least believing there must be a God. It was the example of good Catholics that made me take seriously the claims of the Catholic Church. And one of the claims of the Catholic Church was what I was so longing for, an affirmation that truth can't contradict truth, and that if we can figure things out through reason, and of course our reason is fallible, we can make mistakes, but through right reason done appropriately, like in the scientific method, trying to falsify our thesis and our and challenge our held beliefs, if we can show and that truth is real, that truth is to be affirmed, and there's nothing in faith that contradicts that truth or vice versa. Yep. But we have to also tell the story of creation. the story of God's recreative activity. The fact that God is more present to us than we are to ourselves, that he's holding everything in existence. And that with that wonder and awe which one experiences when one's at the ocean or looking at a sunset or seeing the beauty of this cosmos, we have to be able to tell the story of why it is what it is and what God's purpose, because at the end, we're going to have a new heaven and new earth that's brought to perfection. Amen. Where the lion lays down with the lamb and the child can play at the cobra's den. So it's going to be a different earth, but it's going to be a full earth, and that there's a purpose for the cosmos.
Yeah. Well, Monsignor, I want to thank you for your time. Amy in Chicago says that she's got kids in her 20s. The biggest complaint is church is too long. If people want to get plugged into you or Donnelly, what's the best way to do that?
Donnelly.edu.
All right, great institution. Check it out. Hey, like what you just heard? Then share it with your family and friends. And thanks for listening.